Hey folks, welcome to the channel, and this is going to be a video about 5 tips to select the perfect small survival knife for your needs. Now, topics that I've covered a number of times, but in this case, it's going to be specifically about small knives. Some of the options, some of the things you probably want to consider so as to selecting the best one for you. As always, before we go on, if you want to learn more about realistic survival and preparedness, this is what I've been doing for many years now. You have the channel with a ton of information, and you have, of course, my books, Surviving the Economic Collapse, 3 Survival Skills. These are some of the best-selling survival books in English, Spanish, and French. It's about realistic preparedness, not fear and paranoia, simply knowing what you need to do so as to be better prepared, giving a realistic analysis of the world as it is and what's around us. And you will have those in Amazon. It's going to be the best way to buy those, especially if we have Prime with free shipping. So guys, my advice is to think about these 5 points specifically. The first one is pretty obvious, but worth reminding. Go with brands. It's not always the case that a brand knife is going to be more expensive. I think the best example of that is Mora. Mora are fantastic budget knives. These are made in Sweden. These are made by an extremely well-regarded knife manufacturer such as Mora. They've been making knives for an extremely long time. Very good high-quality products and a budget price as well. Now, they have more expensive prices, and we'll get to that in a second, but Mora is definitely one of the good brands out there. You have other ones, and maybe they're not as well known, right? Or maybe it's not something you associate as much, but still a recognizable brand. Haltaforce. These knives at a time were selling for like $3-4, and it's still Haltaforce. They make some good products. Stanley. These are things you are probably familiar with. And then you have the custom, stuff like this, K-Bar, right? These are all, and again, it's not always that because you have a known brand, it is going to be expensive. Then you have knives that are made by known knife makers, stuff like this one made by an Argentine blacksmith, right? A guy called Ogun. That's his mark there on this side. And these are nice knives, but these are knives made by someone that is known in the community, and you can trust those things. That gives you a little bit more peace of mind. Basically, what I'm saying here is avoid going for the cheap ass China-made knife that has no name, no brand backing it. Now, many products, these are in fact made in China, I'm pretty sure, but it has a brand. It means that there's a company backing it, and there was a company making sure the product was made, even though in China, but it was made the right way. So, number 1, go with a well-recognized brand name that has a reputation in the line. Number 2, and kind of close to this, is price. Now, what I'm talking about here, making it a separate point, is that not always price goes along just because of the brand. You have Mora knives that are quite a bit more expensive, and then you have more affordable ones. The Mora Bushcraft Black, I think it is, that's a very nice knife. Now, it's really not all that different from your Clipper, right? So if you're looking at the price, again, same brand, same high standards of manufacturing, and yes, maybe a little bit more price going along with it means it's a little bit stronger, a little bit bigger, usually, or maybe a little bit more the materials used. There's usually some reason why it is going to be more expensive. But if you look at the entire package, you realize that you have excellent knives for very affordable prices, right? And same goes even for custom-made stuff. There's guys that make knives at an affordable price, and there's guys that focus more on the premium stuff. And even the way you market it, maybe your buddy blacksmith makes super strong, reliable knives, and they're affordable. And there's some boutique knife maker that uses super fancy steels, but because of the geometry, because of the heat treatment, because of whatever, it is really not as tough of a knife as the one that is far more affordable, even within the custom-made option. Then I would suggest number 3, going with the steel. And here you have a number of options. There's a lot of them, but let's narrow it down to basic stuff like going with carbon steel or going with stainless steel. Of course, you have a bunch of premium stainless steels and some carbon steels as well, but usually it boils down to those 2. Do you want a carbon steel knife or you want a stainless steel knife? And my advice is very simple. Go with a stainless steel knife. It is the more trouble-free knife. It's the easiest one to keep clean. It is the easiest one to maintain, especially if we're talking about survival knives, right? And I get it. You can use a survival knife of whatever. It could be something, a custom, more expensive piece. But if you're going to go with something that you want functionality as an essential part of what you're looking for, stainless steel is going to be unbeatable. It is far less complicated and trouble-free, and as long as you look after it, your carbon steel blade will be just fine. This is carbon steel. This has been used over the years with a certain amount of care, but it has been used. It's fine. It's not rusted. It is only now developing a little bit of a patina, but no big deal. Carbon steel is fine. But if you're going to look at something that you're going to leave in a survival kit, that you're going to use in maybe very tough situations, again, it is a survival knife. You don't know. You have your backpack, whatever happened, your car broke down in some inconvenient place, whatever is going on, you don't want to be worrying about your knife rusting. It could even be the case that you have this knife, right? Carbon steel blade in its sheath, right? Oh yeah, but this is going to go into, this is a great knife made by this guy, so this is going to go into my my emergency kit. I leave it there, right? I have a bunch of knives. This one goes in there. The day that I remember it's there when I need it the most, because whatever happened, I forgot about that day that rained a lot and the tarp was not in my truck, so everything got wet, including my survival knife. And the day I needed the most, I pull this thing out and it's a rusty mess. Now, rust is not as big of a deal as sometimes people think, but it depends. I've had times in which it was really a mess and it needed a lot of cleaning. And not only did it need a lot of cleaning, it needed to be resharpened as well, because the rust will eat up the apex of the edge and will not really cut well at all. It's just going to catch. So you will have a knife with an issue that should not even be there in the first place, because the best option is obviously going with the stainless steel knife. And even when it comes to not only the knife itself, but the sheath, well, a leather sheath attracts humidity more, gets wet, gets soft, lots of things that you can simply avoid by going with a specific kind of steel. Now let's go quickly. This is a good segue into number 4, which is the design of the blade. What kind of blade design are you going to go for? Now, when it comes to short blades, short survival blades, short bushcrafting blades, I think that there's one king of the hill that is very difficult to bring down, which is your basic Puukko blade. Your basic Puukko knife, it is a fantastic design. Now, let's keep in mind the handle as well. It needs to be comfortable. It needs to be strong. And even if though you may have something that's more expensive or more premium, right, going with something that has wood and whatnot, well, wood is not going to be as strong as plastic, never, no matter how good the knife is. And you may be using some of the best hardwoods out there, which, you know, it's going to be super tough, but it's not going to be as tough or durable as plastic. And also look at this stuff, right? This oxidation here in the brass, this stuff. Imagine if this was a carbon steel blade. What would be the surprise if you have all of this rusted? You know, little things to keep in mind. Now, be honest with what you need. Oh, I want something for self-defense. Well, maybe your small survival knife is heavily intended for defensive use. Maybe this is my small survival knife, a little TDI from K-Bar, right? I think it's the detective model, made in Taiwan, but as I was explaining before, made by a well-known manufacturer. K-Bar is a brand you can usually depend on. So very compact, tiny. The blade is really not all that long, and in fact, this could be even more dangerous. But it's going to be great retention that you have here with this thing. Law enforcement officers, guys in the military, usually they like the angled TDI kind of knife. But it's really focused more on defense. What about, well, honestly, the only thing I intend on slaying is a nice steak. So maybe I go with something like this. It's a traditional Argentine knife for eating asado. No, it's not barbecue. It's asado. But sitting in a nice place in the outdoors and having an asado and cooking meat and cutting it, and you know, if you're doing things right, you don't even have a ceramic dish. You have a wooden disc in which you cut your meat because you don't want to ruin your knife. You know, stuff that, well, all of those things are super enjoyable, especially if this is part of your culture, as it is in my case. These are all things you really appreciate. It's part of who you are, right? eating meat on a piece of wood, and this is gonna be so much nicer than using this thing. Why? Because it is more of a traditional thing. It is a small knife. It's not gonna be as strong. It's a narrow tang. It goes all the way through this nyandu bone, right? Now, having said that, even though it's not gonna be as strong as your more a heavy duty, well, it's not intended to. It is intended to, poke a few chorizos when you're doing your asado, which is kind of like a sin, but whatnot. But cutting meat, for cutting meat, and maybe a little bit of fine cutting, this thing will last forever. It will last several lifetimes as long as you use it properly. Now, if I'm some dumbass doing YouTube videos on, oh, this is a piece of shit, look, I'm batoning with this crap, and the bone broke, this is bullshit, this knife sucks. No, you're an idiot. The knife is fine, but you're using for something that's not intended. This is intended for cutting meat, cutting whatever. It is very much a cutting and a little bit of a poking tool, and that's it. Could you freaking hurt someone with this? Of course you can. But the nature of the materials being used and the design of the knife itself being a nice, narrow little tang going through this bone, you have to be a little bit more careful. That's basically it. It's going to cut, but it's not going to be nearly as durable as some of the other things. If I want something, because of the intended use that I have for this, oh no, but you know what? I want something for a backpack. I live in a more urban environment. I could find myself maybe a little bit more outdoors, but really, I just need a strong, reliable, cheap knife. Okay, dude, go with something like this, or go and buy a bunch of cheap Moras. Their cheapest Mora, that's very durable. It's going to be basically this stuff, and maybe not looking as nice as this one. It has just one. I think the red one that I have is just red handle. Those are like $9. Buy a bunch of those, throw them in your different bags. That's it. These, again, and this is going back to the point of price. You buy a bunch of these things, right? And they go well for your 72-hour kit, your bug out bag, your get home bag in your car. I would go, again, stainless steel, right? Not the carbon steel that this thing is made of. It is fine, but carbon steel, less problematic. Stainless steel, less problematic. You buy a bunch of these things. They're cheap. It's a brand that is reliable, that is known. It also happens to be a very nice bright orange, which is a plus in a survival kit. Bright orange colors, it's a plus. For the more bushcrafty kind of guy, they will go with more the brown, green, black, and whatnot. But this, for a survival kit, great. Very high visibility. Keep that in mind. So depending on oh no, you know what? I actually do live in the sticks because I live in a forest, and that's where I mostly move around and about, and I drive my truck, and and I'm still looking for a small survival knife because I want to put together a small survival kit. Well, my advice would be go with everything that I just said, but try to go with a little bit of a tougher, heavy duty option. Mora does make their heavy duty Mora. It's basically your Mora, but heavy duty. These things are indeed tougher. You also have from Haltafors. These are super affordable. I bought these for $3-4. I remember back in the day, that's why I bought a bunch of them. These are tougher, short blades. They're still well within this short. This one has a nice big handle. If you have like a massive hand, this one, damn it, it's pretty big. Even look at that thing. So nice big handle, comfortable, and tough. You can put a ton of leverage. I mean, it's not very long, but if you want to have a very strong, short survival knife, these would be maybe the options I would go for. You could go with something that is made by a blacksmith, by a guy, but these are going to be strong not only in the construction, but also the materials, the plastics, the sheets in themselves. These are going to be, and maybe again, no, because I live in a place where I may have to do a lot with a tiny knife. Well, the heavy duty knife means you're more comfortable batoning or using it to chip away on a bigger log or whatever. It is gonna be a little beast that takes a ton of use and abuse. Maybe that's what you need. Or even if you're like in more of an urban environment and you wanna go with, no, but I also, I live in the middle of a big city. I live in an apartment, in a condo. But in my survival bag, I see the possibility of maybe I have to pry with this thing. Maybe I have to bust open a wooden window or a door, even an aluminum window frame. I can just bend, break, or even cut through it with this thing. Actually, yes, you can. If you have a little bit of time and you have something to hit it with, you can just cut through a piece of aluminum with either one of these. It's gonna go through. Aluminum is softer than steel. You could probably do this with your basic Mora, but you will have more peace of mind doing that with a heavy-duty version. Bending, if it's a car wreck, a car accident, and you need to just pry the crap, of course, be very careful with it because it's a sharp, super sharp blade. But in terms of putting this thing and wedging and levering, the bigger, tougher, not bigger, but the thicker, heavy-duty version will give you that option a little bit more than your basic model, okay? Last point, and this may be of a bonus point here, is the legality of all of this. Make sure you fall in line with whatever law requires. If it's a 4-inch blade, go with a 4-inch blade. If it's a non-serrated blade or whatever, go with whatever the law says. And final advice, maybe in those places where there's a little bit of discretional decisions by the authorities or whatnot, go with something that's a little bit less threatening. Hell, maybe even if you have to explain your actions, if you defend yourself with this thing, you're using something that was clearly designed for an intended use. If you defend yourself with your Stanley, yeah, this is not gonna get you out of something that you fucked up bad. If you did something wrong, yeah, good luck with that. But this, if you see this, what is it that you're seeing? You see a tool. You see something that someone has in a toolbox, right? Maybe you actually have a toolbox with your kit and this goes in there. But these kind of things, especially if it's not tactical-ish looking, that may work in your favor as well. Maybe just doesn't catch as much attention. The bright colors are usually a little bit more agreeable with the social norms and whatnot, but stuff like this, I really like these things. Stanley, recognized brand, super cheap knife, stainless steel, still very much the same thing. Folks, that's gonna be all for now. Again, I'll leave links for some of these things below in case you wanna buy a knife for yourself. It's not gonna change. It's gonna be from the affiliates of Amazon. Not gonna change your price one bit, but helps out in the channel. Take care, have a great day.